What's up guys, hello to Footballtalk here. We're about 3 weeks away from the 2024 NFL Draft, and I'm knee deep into evaluating well over 200 prospects at this point. I've broken down the top 10 of several classes on my site, hello to Footballtalk.com already. Running backs, linebackers, wide receivers, corners, offensive tackles, edges, and now this week I'm doing interior O and D line. The link is down below in the description if you want to really dive in after listening to this. In this video, however, I want to shine some light on guys that I haven't gotten to yet or were outside my top 10 or 12 at the position. Some names I want to plant my flag on as my guys, who I'd personally pound the table for if I were in the draft room of one of these NFL teams. They're far from best at their respective spots in several cases, but I think are undervalued in the grand scheme of things as I compare my rankings with consensus boards. I'll talk about one player at each position, explain the skill set with strengths and weaknesses, trying to briefly encapsulate the role at the next level, how I have those guys stacked up, and then at the end bring up another name or two that I considered for each category. Don't want to waste any more of your time now, just want to quickly remind you that if you enjoy the analysis and want to support my work, hitting that like button and subscribing for future episodes, if you haven't done so yet, would be greatly appreciated. And you can find my social media handles down below for even more of my thoughts on stuff happening around football. Let's dive in with the first position now, which of course is quarterback, with Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina. 6 foot, 210 pounds, a redshirt senior. The former number 1 quarterback in the country started his career at Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley, and when he got the starting job 1 year later, he looked like a potential number 1 pick eventually. Things went haywire the following season, eventual Heisman Trophy winner and the actual projected first guy off the board, and Caleb Williams took over, and Rattler ended up transferring to South Carolina, where he did his best to elevate their program, and they had a few bright spots, but he just had very little help around him, especially from a protection perspective. But this dude can throw the piss out of the ball, as some people might say, creates easy velocity, even when he's not getting a solid platform to release from, has that Aaron Rodgers-esque flick of the wrist to drop deep balls into the bucket, but it's the way he can teleport the ball to the sideline, even from the far hash, that really stands out. Shows an impressive ability to pedal away from rushers closing in, and getting enough zip on the ball still to hit throws coming into his vision, along with the quick feet when he's moved out the spot to reset. Elusive as he moves in and out of the pocket, and can get his eyes back up the field to locate targets and hit them late. He's not a great athlete and kinda has the Baker Mayfield syndrome, where he thinks he can do more moving around than he's actually capable of outside the pocket. There are still quite a few questionable decisions on tape, where he's trying to beat defenders with the throw, and he's not a pinpoint passer all the time, well placed the ball on the backside of his targets and crossing routes and stuff like that. However, while there still can be some chaos to his game, he has clearly worked on calming his eyes and feet as a pocket passer, despite being pressured on an insane 37.9% of his dropbacks. The move to the Gamecocks kinda relit the fire under him, and he's become more mature with just throwing the ball out of bounds if nothing is there. I do have the consensus Big 6 ahead of him, although my order seems to be quite different to consensus, which we'll get to in a little less than 2 weeks from now. But I don't think there's a massive gap between number 6 and Rattler, whose arm talent is up there with just about anybody not named Caleb Williams and Drake May. I wouldn't want to throw him out there early, but he clearly has started traits, and if I miss out in the first round, getting this guy potentially in the middle of day 2 would be very appealing to me. I also consider the next gap here in my quarterback rankings. Jordan Travis from Florida State has played the position in the college ranks nearly as well as anybody over the past 2 seasons. Quick decision maker and accurate distributor with a very repeatable motion, big time anticipation throws, and mirrors his feet to a receiver's break, while always having a plan on third down seems like. Tremendous big time throw versus turnover worthy play rates, and this dude is slippery as hell, extending plays, along with being stronger than you'd expect, and a super tough runner. Has a tendency of falling away in too many throws, and lacks top tier arm strength for throws outside the numbers, but once he's fully back from the fractured foot, I think he can be a high quality backup from day 1, who the locker room will love, with the type of competitive mindset to start for a few years in the right environment. Moving on onto the running back position, and the name up here is Tyrone Tracy from Purdue. 5'11", 205 pounds, also a redshirt senior, which will kinda be a theme for this list to be honest, after I looked at it once I was done. Once a wide receiver recruit for Iowa, where he basically sat a year before being quite productive in an offense where those guys typically go to die, but then had a couple of quiet years and ended up transferring to Purdue in 2022, where he started the transformation to the running back spot, along with contributing as a return specialist, and this past season he got a chance to show off his tremendous skills for the position. For someone with less than 150 career carries, Tracy is very natural with altering stride length and changing up his footwork as he deals with traffic, can deeply press creases with the loose lower body and an explosive jump cut to make defenders wrong for committing to him initially, has the burst to get around the corner and great curvilinear movement to bend up runs outside the tackle box. And then he becomes a kick returner in the open field, where he can string together moves in succession very impressively, has better power than you might expect, and can stride away from people. Of course, there are some technicalities as a runner that he doesn't fully grasp yet, like optimally utilizing pullers, has to become a more mature decision maker, whether it's bouncing stuff or cutting across the grain if the picture isn't clear. More of that light-footed running style, which limits his ability to stay alive versus contact, and pass protection is still a bit of a work in progress, cutting down space to blitzers, and bringing some shock in his hands to gain control. But it's not due to a lack of effort or that he can't learn some of those things, and the value you get out of him as a pass catcher is a big plus, showing his background in the way he can pace routes, change up things on the fly in order to beat leverage, and then always catches the ball with his fingertips. He also had an outstanding combine workout to back up some of the athletic traits that you see on tape. I have him way up there as my number 8 running back, and is quite deep class, ahead of guys like Wisconsin's Braylon Allen, Notre Dame's Audric Estime and others, as he offers a very different skill set that I'd be willing to invest into in the 3rd round, when he's projected to go late 5th to early 6th. 2 other names I wanted to bring up here: Ray Davis from Kentucky, a true running back's running back with great instincts, natural adjustments in his step sequencing as a runner, almost odd with the way he can reduce his frame in traffic and find openings for positive yardage, before he'll drop his pads into one half of would-be tacklers. Lacks high and explosive traits and doesn't blow you away with dynamic moves in the open field, but also catches the ball well and has a plan of what to do with it. He's currently my RB5. And Dylan Johnson from Washington, very much in the same mold. Poor combine testing will push him down boards, but if you're looking for an instant contributor you can pick up in the 3rd or 4th round, this is your guy. Such an excellent understanding for how to set up runs conceptually, and highly efficient in his movements, carries the ball high and tight, and oftentimes looks like a hot knife running through butter with how he pulls through wraps. Only dropped 1 of 52 catchable targets last season, with plenty of full extension grabs, and showcased his toughness battling for injuries during the Huskies' run at a national championship. Our next position here, wide receiver, where I have Jermaine Burton from Alabama. Definitely a big name program, but he's been undervalued here, I believe. I was going back and forth though between multiple names here, but Burton is someone I barely hear being discussed, other than by one of the best in the business a couple of days ago, Matt Waldman. Burton is a former top 100 national recruit who had a couple of fairly productive seasons as part of a deep wide receiver room for Georgia, which wasn't utilized a ton as a whole, before moving on to Alabama, where he hauled in 79 passes for nearly 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns across 2 seasons. Presents a diverse release package with violent hands to sweep away press attempts, his acceleration off the line is excellent, and he's regularly able to gain control of the route early. Then he can alter tempo and cannot dissociate his upper and lower body in order to make it challenging for defenders to anticipate the break point, and he has the play strength to fight through contact, along with showing a tremendous understanding for scramble rules. He has that extra gear when the ball is in the air, didn't drop a single pass last season with those sticky hands, and at 6 foot flat, his ability to out-wrestle defenders down the field, gain rebounding position, and win through contact is high quality. He can kind of drift on routes breaking towards the middle of the field, not the greatest catch radius with 31-inch arms, and he only forced 3 missed tackles after the catch last season. But really in terms of NFL decision makers, it comes down to getting to know the guy, considering he had that incident where he hit a fan in the Tennessee game, and understanding how the exit from Georgia went. He plays with fire in his gut, constantly talking trash after the play, but he'll need to learn how to not allow it to bubble over. If he can do that, the tape is very impressive, and he's been productive in the SEC, never complaining or cheating you with effort in his routes. He has the start-stop quickness for dramatic moves in the open field to also become more effective after the catch. I think someone takes this kid late on day 2, and he's going to start for a team right away, with the flexibility to play the X because of his ability to get off contact, Z because he has that vertical threading ability, or even the slot to some degree. 3 other names I considered here: Adonai Mitchell from Texas, still on wide receiver 4, seems to be kind of a polarizing name in this process, put up tremendous testing numbers at the combine, but doesn't always play up to those, and when you go through the advanced metrics, they're kind of underwhelming, along with having a couple of injuries that hindered him during his time at Georgia. But I just believe he has such an impeccable understanding as a route runner, altering speed and attacking the blind spots of defenders, snatches passes away from his frame, and he might have double-digit touchdowns as a rookie already in the right situation, because his quick feet and feel for space in the red zone are tremendous. Johnny Wilson, Florida State, projected by many transition to tight end early on at 6'6", 230 pounds, but the combine testing looks like a legit outside receiver, and I believe a lot of his skills translate well into a jumbo-sized power slot role. He's not going to detach from this defender vertically, but he can gain stack position early in the route. He's efficient with the way he breaks those off, and then he has several big boy box out catches in contested situations on tape down the field. It's more about aligning his hands consistently, which leads to frustrating drops at times. And then Javon Baker, UCF, a former 4-star recruit for Alabama, transferred to UCF due to how loaded the wide receiver room was, but instantly became a big play threat for the Golden Knights. One of the most effective deep threats in the country, with the speed to blow by just about anybody, and then he ate on deep outs and stuff like that, by taking advantage of the extensive cushion he was given. He's also exceptional at adjusting his body down the field, winning through contact, and rolling away from defenders in order to secure catches at the sideline. He's just not the most precise route runner, and will kinda clap attack the ball in routine catches. Next up, tight end, with Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, 6'4", 250 pounds, a former walk-on at K-State who worked his way up the ranks and ended up with 80 catches for over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns over the past 2 seasons. Now coming out as a redshirt senior, used in a variety of ways, playing inline, the slot, wing, and even fullback for the Wildcats. He's able to play with a lot of sink in his hips and great leg drive to be an effective block on different assignments, whether he has to widen the edge on the front side or secure moving targets out in the corner when the ball is going out there. As a route runner, he's quicker in and out of his breaks than you'd expect for that more squatty build. He seems unfazed by defenders raking at the ball as they try to wrap around his body, and he has those strong hands to hold on to the catch. Plus then he becomes a problem to bring down once he has a head of steam, clearing arm tackles with ease and churning through contact. The fairly short arms will limit his reach as a blocker and his catch radius. He won't fit any traditional wide requirements playing in line, I'd say, at least for teams that sort of label them still that way. And you may want to make him your number 2 early on, so you can put him off the ball as more of an H-back, a movable piece, who hasn't shown you a whole lot of running down the seam in college. With that being said, if you understand what he is, he can be a highly useful piece to an offense, and he kind of surprises you in some areas by actually being a little more than that. When you look at his combine numbers, they're eerily similar to T.J. Hawkinson, a standard for the Minnesota Vikings, who isn't a dynamic athlete necessarily either, and even though he was more tested playing on the hip of offensive tackles, he's more known for his ability now to be crisp in his breaks and catching the ball in condensed space. Plus, Sinnott had an excellent week of Senior Bowl, concluded by a massive 3rd and 16 conversion in the actual game, where he just ran through a couple of attempted tackles, and that is kind of illustrative for the type of player that he is. He's probably going to end up as my tight end 3 behind only Georgia's Brock Bowers and Jatavian Sanders from Texas, while consensus rankings have him falling to day 3. The 2 other names are considered here, Tanner McLaughlin from Arizona, a former unranked wide receiver coming out of high school, who transitioned to tight end 2 years ago, maybe not going to make a living playing on the ball and creating displacement in the run game, but does a good job of rolling his hips for contact, and was effective leading up into the hole. Frames the ball very well with overhand technique, finishes catches through some big hits, and he quickly transitions up the field once the ball is in his hands with impressive start-stop quickness. And McCallan Castle from Tennessee first stood out to me during Shrine Bowl week, where he showed good detail in his routes and was kinda gliding through breaks, along with the strong hands to finish catches. Started out back in 2018 at Cal, before transferring to UC Davis for a couple of years, where he was highly productive, and then joining another Power 5 program, where tight end is very underutilized at Tennessee, but you really like the moments of finding space in zone coverage, and now consistently extends for passes away from his frame. More of that compact build as well, and at his best digging out linebackers on inside blocks. That has us moving on to the offensive line, which are split into tackles and interior O-linemen. First up with the tackle position with Christian Jones from Texas, 6'5", 310 pounds, one of the top 1,000 national recruits back in 2018. Jones didn't see any action his first year in Austin, and then he was largely limited to special teams the following season. From that point on, however, he started all 48 games he's been available for since being inserted in 2020, flipping between right, left, and then right tackle again, and that experience is a major plus considering he didn't play a whole lot of football growing up, since he was more so focused on soccer actually, which is kind of funny for a big man like that. This guy has a real knack for creating the initial momentum on defenders in the run game and centering his blocks. He then displays tremendous leg drive and a finishing mindset, which also shows up when engulfing linebackers a whole lot of times. As a pass protector, he can land potent two-handed strikes to take charge of rushers or force them to widen the arc. His reaction time versus crossface moves and transitioning on twists is minimal, with the agility to counter those, and he has the strong lower body to deal with power as well. He's decreased the sacks and total pressures he's surrendered each of the past 4 seasons, down to just 1 sack and 10 additional pressures in 2023 against a pretty loaded slate of edge rushers. You do see aggressive D linemen win the beat up against him when he's not quite quick enough out of his stance for cutoffs on the backside of wide zone. His hands can slide up too high in pass protection at times, and I wouldn't ask him to execute many long pulls where he's asked to gather and pick up moving targets, since his speed to get to those spots is also rather underwhelming. However, I think he's been underrated in the strong class for offensive tackles. Now, I don't see a player who's going to compete for the Pro Bowl in many of his years in the league, but I think he could be a starter on the right end of the line for like 8 to 10 years in the right situation. I was really impressed with his strength throughout Senior Bowl week, being able to hunker down against some of the better pass rushers in the country during one-on-ones, while some other guys at his position really struggled. He's my number 10 tackle, ahead of guys with more appealing athletic traits maybe, in Houston's Patrick Paul or Washington's Roger Rosengarten, and I think he should firmly be a mid-day 2 selection compared to the middle of the 4th round where it's currently listed. 2 other names to bring up here: Walter Rouse from Oklahoma, kinda in that same mold as Jones, and also started really paying attention to him during All-Star weeks, with the Shrine Bowl practices to be more precise. Super senior with 61 career starts between Stanford and Oklahoma last year. I think he's more pro ready than his sooner teammate Tyler Guyton, who is expected to go at the end of the 1st round. Gets caught overstriding and makes himself vulnerable of getting slipped inside at times, but when he's urgent, he can create some movement in the run game, and then in pass pro he's so good at keeping his base aligned, timing up his punches, countering what opponents are trying to throw at him. I love him early on day 3. And Anim Dankwa from Howard, who I had never heard before the Shrine Bowl, but really left an impression on me. Grew up in Ghana, playing soccer actually before coming to Canada, and then ultimately being picked up by one of the smaller programs here. On the opposite end of Rouse, where he's still very raw in terms of overstriding and not maximizing how he can apply force in the run game, and then his footwork and pass protection will largely need to be overhauled. But this dude is 6'8", 355 pounds with an 85.5-inch wingspan, quick out of his stance to anticipate, picks up linebackers like the little kids against the lower level of competition, along with incredibly nimble feet in pass pro, and you're just not going to get through this dude. I'd much rather take on a project like him at the end of the draft than some of the guys expected to go in the middle rounds. And for our final offensive position with the interior O-line, I'm looking at Mason McCormick from South Dakota State. 6'4", 315 pounds, another one of those 60 seniors. After an initial redshirt, he started 57 consecutive games for the Jackrabbits, helping them win back-to-back national titles. He was a team captain in 3 straight years and was named first team All-FCS in the latter 2. The man is built like a fridge, but he comes out of his stance with great urgency and pad level, consistently able to create vertical displacement in the run game, but then he's also very capable of executing longer pulls and flying out into space on screen passes as well. In my scouting reports, I know that this guy is like a brick wall, with cinder blocks for hands to stun and control interior pass rushers. He uses those hands in independent fashion to keep defenders squared up, and is very patient as guys try to throw multiple moves at him. Last season, he didn't give up a single sack and just 3 total pressures on the quarterback across 376 pass blocking snaps. I do believe there's some stiffness in his game when it comes to adjusting to moving targets on run plays or redirecting after setting one-way pass pro. The edges of his frame weren't challenged a whole lot at SDSU, I thought, and once he faces more twitchy NFL rushers, those heavy feet could become more of an issue, trying to not put himself into compromised positions. With that being said, those concerns never showed up during Shrine Bowl week, where he might have lost 1 rep across all 3 full pad practices. He was constantly refitting his hands and staying in control of defenders, trying to find ways to get around him, since they couldn't go through him at all. He also regularly created significant horizontal movement and opened up lanes to cut up behind for running backs. He's been rising since he received a relative athletic score of 9.97, which was somewhat surprising also to me, but this has been my guy the whole way, and I have him up to interior offensive lineman number 8. The 2 other names I considered here, Cooper Beebe from Kansas State, another my guy for like 3 years now. absolute ass kicker in the run game, who only became more devastating once he was moved inside one spot from left tackle early in his career with the Wildcats. We love his ability to get on the move and bird targets as a puller, while having quite a similar build to McCormick, where you're just not going to move him back into the quarterback, and he has those clamps for hands to not allow guys to escape once it's connected to the chest. The two weaknesses: only 31.5 inch arms, and I don't want him in an outside zone heavy scheme due to lacking the short area agility to take care of scoop blocks in the NFL consistently. And Hunter Norset from Penn State, another name who seemingly has been rising, but just around spot 200 on consensus boards who haven't quite caught up yet, when I put together these notes at least. Great snap to step quickness to eat up the space towards first level defenders. You really like how well coordinated and agile he is on combo blocks, being able to secure and climb. Super active feet, enhanced to mirror interior rushers from multiple moves, and very fluid at transition through twists. He isn't going to blow shade nose tackles off the landmarks, and he gets a little too aggressive with oversliding or lunging into contact with rushers, but at worst, this should be an excellent primary backup. This has us moving on to the defensive side of the ball, where we start on the edge with Xavier from Clemson, 6'2", 250 pounds, the former number 3 overall recruit back in 2018, despite all talent Clemson had on the D-line that season. With 3 first-round picks and another one in the 4th, Thomas's talent demanded playing time, and he was on the field for over 300 defensive snaps as a true freshman. Rushing the pass on about half of those, he recorded 26 pressures that year. Unfortunately, his production never truly reached those heights with extended opportunities, and he missed some time with injuries, but he's continued to be a quality starter and leader for the Tigers. He packs good thickness throughout his frame and has great natural power to set a firm edge in the run game, was frequently asked to crash inside of tackles and creates disruption on early downs. He constantly fights through holds, and you see him chase down people 15 to 20 yards down the field quite regularly. As a pass rusher, his explosion of the ball and ability to rush with leverage made him highly effective on side scissors moves and converting speed to power if tackles did sell out for his upfield burst. As an older prospect, you see the understanding for softening the corner by jabbing inside or forcing tackles to commit by flashing his hands. His sack numbers may not be up there, but over the last 2 full seasons that he had, Thomas racked up 40 plus pressures in each of those on less than 300 pass rush snaps respectively. It definitely was a late, kind of slow burn in terms of his college career picking back up after flashing as a freshman, and he's been dealing with some bruises throughout his time with the Tigers, making his profile on the surface not super attractive. He has room to improve his ability to anchor against drive blocks, utilizing the one arm being longer than 2 principle, and rushing the passer. He needs to do a better job of defeating the tackle's outside hand and not allowing it to fit into his frame, where coming up just short of 33-inch arms doesn't help out in initial combats. Still, he's a guy I thought of higher each of the past 3 years, when he could have potentially declared for those drafts. It's great to see him as high as pretty much any time since his sophomore year, but he's still projected to go fringe 6th to 7th round, and I just think that's too low. Thomas had an excellent triangle week, where you could see that burst of the ball and ability to win around or through tackles could really shine. He's a high effort player, and I can't get over the path it's taken to get him here, because the upside for a former top recruit is still there. I targeted him early on day 3. 2 other names I wanted to bring up here: Jonah Ellis from Utah, certainly one of the more well-known names I've talked about today in terms of draft media. Crazy NFL bloodlines, with his dad having been in the league and 3 brothers currently still in there, all in the front 7. The motor is always running, and he's looking for different ways to shed blocks in order to get to the ball. He's a rather undisciplined run defender and will need to work on his positioning in order to set the edge on early downs, because he has the upper body strength to do so, but then he's just so skilled as a pass rusher, has a few different swipe moves, will throw out a wicked spin occasionally, has the power to keep working even if the initial approach stalls. He's been an incredible player for the Utes, showing a lot of toughness down the stretch as well, battling for a shoulder injury, and is just not talked about enough as a top 50 overall prospect for me. And Eyabi Okionoma from Charlotte, another former top 5 recruit, just behind Xavier Thomas back in 2018, started out at Bama, where he never really got to see the field, 1 year at UT Martin, then got on the field a little bit for Michigan, but really ascended these past 2 seasons as a force off the edge for Charlotte. Incredibly aggressive, violent player, where he crashes through gaps to great penetration, or accelerates full force into pulling guards. Also has that explosion of the ball and into contact to go speed to power, and way too quick for guards to handle on twists. Just gets a little too reckless, generally needs to do a better job of keeping his outside arm free, and learn how to stack pass rush moves on top of one another. As far as the interior defensive line goes, I want to talk about Fabien Lovett from Florida State. the other Florida State D-tackle, so to speak, 6'4", 315 pounds, one of the top 500 national recruits from Mississippi State. Back in 2019, I believe, Lovett started all but 2 of 15 games as a true freshman and looked good, but decided to transfer to FSU the following offseason. And he didn't get to play as extensively as he would have in most other places, leading to fairly limited production in terms of negative plays created, even though he was a quality contributor for the Seminoles. But my god, this guy's a bear who will not surrender ground to the offense. He's able to lock out peek and jet for 2-gap assignments with those insanely long 35.5-inch arms. But it's against double teams where it looks almost weird how he's able to fend them off and own his space, with an uncanny ability to counter the force that has been applied onto him. Plus, then he's incredibly slippery playing without gloves as well, to clean up his frame and wrap up ball carriers, trying to get through lanes around him. Rushing the passer, Lovett's approach is fairly simplistic, as he will put guards and centers on skates with the bull rush, and then can yank them aside in order to chase around quarterbacks. I do want to commend the level of activity in his hands, however, when he's not just selling off of power. The production on passing downs is certainly limited, as he didn't get a ton of chances to just get up the field and define dropback situations. But even when he did, those lacked some pop. He doesn't have the short area burst once he's disengaged from blockers to track down nearby ball carriers regularly, and while playing without gloves makes him look even tougher to get a hold of, it does probably hurt his ability to finish tackles a little bit, as he's missed at least 14.3% of attempted stops each of the prior 4 seasons after he was really good at it this past year. Still, this dude is supposed to be the 24th highest ranked interior defensive lineman in this draft, and barely get drafted at all. I just don't get it. Playing alongside studs like Braden Fisk and Jared Verse certainly played a part in that, but watching the tape, there aren't many people more physically dominant on the defensive side of the ball in this draft. I'd be willing to take this guy in the 4th and can probably wait until the 5th and got myself a starting nose tackle with some scheme versatility. 2 other guys to bring up here: Chris Jenkins Jr. from Michigan, son of Chris Jenkins Sr. of course. This kid has been a known commodity for a while now, but it feels like he's kinda lost some of that shine, and I don't really get why. I believe he could be a borderline elite run defender midway through his rookie season, where he comes out of his stance low and with those hands ready to strike in order to dictate terms to blockers. Working in more of a read and react front at Michigan, he wasn't allowed to just shoot up the field a whole lot, but it doesn't mean he can't do it, because the quickness is clearly there. His pass rush arsenal is fairly limited at this point, but he has some legit bend for an interior rusher, often paired with the dip and rip, and then he shows the ability to crossface or hit guards with a spin move. And Christian Bird from Northern Iowa, another Shrine Bowl standout without the type of pedigree, a super senior from UNI who showed continuous improvement, and in last season, his 40 total pressures ranked behind only Oregon's Brandon Dawes, Texas's Brian Murphy II, and Illinois' Jordan Newton, so perennial all-conference players in the Power 5 among interior D linemen. Very much a one-trick pony in passing downs, but that bull rush is one heck of a trick, and he's become better at converting that into push-pulls. In run defense, he's more about getting off the ball and overwhelming blockers with the strike in his hands, rather than IDing blocking schemes and keeping one arm free, but the dude eats double teams for breakfast. Transitioning to the second level of the defense now with linebacker Jordan Magee from Temple, 6'2", 225 pounds, just a 2-star recruit in 2019. It took Magee a month into his 3rd season to take over the starting gig at wild linebacker for the Owls, but he never gave it up anymore. Across those final 35 games, he racked up 220 total tackles, about 30 of those for loss, 8 sacks, 10 passes broken up, and a couple of fumbles forced. I didn't know who this kid really was until I watched him make a name for himself at the Combine, but I was blown away once I put on the tape. He consistently plays with an aggressive mindset and doesn't shy away from crashing from one half of a pulling guard, while the shock in his hands and ability to keep his frame clean with those 32-inch arms generally stood out, dealing with significantly bigger bodies. He can be a weapon producing TFLs as a rundown blitzer and generally beating blockers to a spot. Then he's light on his feet and his fluid hips as a zone dropper, and he was legitimately asked to take the number 3 receiver in trips and man him up. The pass rush numbers were elite last season, with 20 pressures on just 32 opportunities, which is something that should be tapped into more at the next level with his type of closing burst and affinity for contact. He does have a rather slim body type without much girth in his arms or legs. You see him gamble for cutback lanes rather than staying in line with the back hip of running backs, and ends up running himself out of the picture in the process. While he does get fairly tall in his back pedal, causing him to slip a few times, and his only career interception came as a true freshman. Nevertheless, he's somebody I just don't get when nobody's talking about him, especially in what is perceived to be a weak linebacker class, at least assuming some people have gotten to his tape. Apparently he's risen up a little bit as of recent, but still projected to go around pick 200. When I looked at him as a target early on D3 as my number 10 linebacker in this class, he's a will only I think, but he can be a legit starter in the right situation. Two other names I considered here: Nathaniel Watson from Mississippi State, much more of a well-known commodity among college fans, especially in the SEC, as an all-conference performer. Bookie Watson will shoot his gap quickly if nobody's broken up to him on combos early, has suddenness to work around blocks, but also nearly 33-inch arms to keep them at bay. You really like his prospects as a Tampa 2 dropper, with his ability to gain depth and the height that he brings, along with general instincts in coverage. And then he led all FBS linebackers in his draft class with 35 total pressures, showing an understanding for how to angle his rushes and a relentless attitude. Just gets locked into the backfield action at times, doesn't yet maximize his length dealing with blockers, and with very little man coverage tape on him. And JD Bertrand from Notre Dame, also a highly effective blitzer, with 30 QB pressures on significantly fewer pass rush snaps, significantly shorter arms at only 30.5 inches, not the smoothest in his transitions or very comfortable having to play with his back to the quarterback, but he's just so consistent with reading his keys, letting his eyes take into the ball, and in his great contact balance to battle with bigger bodies in tight quarters. He makes his presence felt in coverage, is a very reliable tackler in space, and one of the better leaders overall in this entire draft. Bringing us to the secondary, and we're going to start with corner here, where I have Renardo Green from Florida State, another Seminole I want to talk about here, who took a while to find his footing among a talented secondary in Tallahassee. Green came in as one of the top 500 national recruits in 2019, and was only a part-time starter his first 2 years. These latter two, however, he's been a fixture in all but one of 25 contests, and one of the better lockdown corners in the country, with 18 pass breakups and a pick across that stretch. You look at this guy's numbers last season as a pressman corner, they're up there with just about anybody in this class. 15 completions on 32 targets, 1 pick, 8 PBUs, with a passer rating in the mid-50s. He's like a pest for receivers trying to shake him off, using that wide base and well-timed strikes to impede their progress, remaining sticky throughout the route. Doesn't allow himself to get pulled too far off his landmarks, or look uncomfortable capping over routes and quarters, plays the receiver's hip pocket exceptionally well, and he's a master at defending goal line fades. He didn't play with his eyes inside a whole lot, but did show good ability to track the ball, and has shown substantial improvements as a tackler, also leading to an average of just 3 yards after the catch surrendered. He does feature a fairly slender build, where if the receiver becomes the aggressor in order to create separation at the breakpoint, or push off to create windows for back shoulder balls, he's gonna have a tough time. I think there's room to improve his ability to locate and make plays on the ball, as well as just toning it down a little bit, with the physicality beyond 5 yards in order to avoid flags. Plus, I would still like to see him disengage from blocks and be more firm edge set in the run game. With that being said, if you're looking for a pressman corner with the technical refinement and mindset to start D1, if you can shade a safety his way or change up the picture on quarterbacks, and he can deny those quick hitters on the backside, even though you may grab him outside the top 100 selections, Green is a name to pay attention to. He was locking dudes up throughout Shrine Bowl week, and if you go back to some of his bigger matchups, like LSU in the season opener, he really leaves an impression on you. I had him tied for 10th for my corner rankings, and he's currently 19th at his position on consensus boards. Two smaller guys I've considered here: Daquan Hardy from Penn State. Not a lot of buzz around him as the quasi-starter in the slot alongside Kalen King and Johnny Dixon in recent years, but had the best tape among the three I thought, plays above his weight class and is physical in man coverage, great click and close burst on routes, defends those inside fades really well with look and lean technique, understands well how to pass off assignments and when to key the quarterback's eyes late in the down if his area is voided, and you really like his ability to elude blockers and pursue the ball across the field. At 5'9", 180 pounds with only 30-inch arms, he's going to be pigeonholed into an undersized slot who can be nudged off at the top of routes, but he ran a 4.38 at the combine and had the highest vertical jump of anybody at the event at 42.5 inches, so at least he's going to be a useful package play, I think. And Miles Harden from South Dakota, not South Dakota State, but the South Dakota Coyotes, barely projected to be drafted at all, but he's among the top FCS prospects in this draft, I think. Super competitive kid, packs the shock in his hands to disrupt receivers at the line when asked to press, refuses to be put in trail position by continuing to fight the hands, and you can just go back to how he invited the challenge of going up against the excellent Missouri wide receiver duo of Lovett Burton, who may be a top 10 pick next year, and Theo Weiss. Excellent eye balance between the quarterback and receivers in zone, understanding from pointing stuff as a high-low defender, and quickly slings guys to the ground if they catch the ball around him. And you see him sit some guys on the asses in the run or screen game. He's also just a bit shorter than you'd like, and wasn't very reliable with contain responsibility or as a tackler, but he was fun to watch. Finally, let's get to safety with Kitan Oladapo from Oregon State, 6'2", 215 pounds, another redshirt senior. Not being ranked by the recruiting services back in 2018, Oladapo only got to start once over his first 2 seasons with the Beavers, but showed his ability in that one game in order to make him a starter in all but 1 of 39 contests these past 3 years combined. He racked up well over 200 total tackles, 12.5 of those for loss, 3 picks, and 22 more passes broken up over that stretch. This guy was like the Cam Chancellor of the Pac-12 these last couple of years, as an enforcer of elite run defense, which was backed up by the highest grade for any safety in that regard from Pro Football Focus in 2023. Really involves himself in the fit if formation or motion dictates it, has sudden hands to elude slot receivers, but can also battle bigger bodies, takes excellent angles downhill, and the dude lays the wood. He looks comfortable playing off-man against tight ends, with good route recognition and a sturdy frame to hold his own, operated at a high level in a split safety structured defense, where he was assigned a variety of responsibilities, showed good awareness for patterns, leveraged the ball well, and had some nice ball skills to hype on the deceptions. He's far less comfortable and actually asked to pedal back and match receivers from more of a traditional slot position. He can be challenged especially with those wide hashes that he had in college, when the offense was running like Mills concepts to the field, where you'd have a deep post and a dig inside, kind of putting him in that bind. And while he's a sound tackler rather than just a hitter, dynamic ball carriers can make him miss in the open field at times. With that in mind, I think if you use this guy the right way, he can be a modern version of that physical box safety who can also play in space. It'll be about allowing him to play more flat-footed when you leave him deep in too high looks, deploying him a lot as a robber, where he can play with his eyes on the quarterback and punish people going over the middle, late rotations to create a +1 in the box, and shut down the run. He's such a cool sort of throwback player. It is outside the top 10 among safeties. He's probably going to end up at number 6 or 7 for me personally. And 3 more names to keep in mind here. Cole Bishop from Utah saw his stock rise after exceptional testing at the Combine, but I was already a big fan when I watched his tape last summer. So good at charging up the alley, dealing with blockers, being able to drop down into the box and play on the edge of tight ends, along with arriving low and wrapping tightly as a great open field stopper. In zone coverage, he understands where the defense is vulnerable, shows great peripheral vision, and consistently limited yak on game days. Plus he was also an elite blitzer in 2022, with some nice wiggle to him. When asked to turn and run with guys vertically, I thought there was a little bit of stiffness, and the long speed used to be a question mark, although not running in the mid 4.4s may eliminate that. Adrian Taylor-Demerson from Texas Tech, maybe the one guy who actually helped himself even more with his athletic testing than Bishop. I love it for him because he's a great player, but I hate now that I fall closer to consensus than when he was still outside the top 200 prospects a couple of months ago, after I had watched him fly around during Shambo Week and fell in love with his tape. Sort of a do-it-all guy in the secondary who can be a rangy single high option or read and drive on stuff in more quarters principles. You really like the balance he finds between working downhill with urgency and control versus the run, and he's a solid tackler. He just gets caught covering grass as a deep post defender at times and allows easy completions in front of him, and he wasn't asked to play true man a whole lot in the slot. And Evan Williams from Oregon, he's the one guy among this group still currently projected to go around pick 200, but his good size at 6 foot flat 200 pounds, takes good tracks to the ball with a knack for navigating around blocks in space, hard charging blitzer, and hits with his chest and eyes up, while his feet stay grounded to drive for the target. Excelled in the modern NFL-oriented defense, which typically was based out of too high looks and relied on match principles. It rotated him into the deep post quite regularly as well, showcasing good conceptual understanding but also spatial awareness. And then he can drop down into the slot, punch guys in the chest, and take control of routes early in man assignments. He's a 4'6" guy without elite range, and a frame that looks pretty maxed out, with upgrade arm length, but I think he's been slept on and might find his way into our top 10 safeties. I just want to quickly mention here that while I did talk about a lot of 5th or even 6th year seniors today, and obviously they'll be a little further ahead in the developmental curve, I did bring up some underclassmen and of course understand the value of bringing in guys at a younger age with more untapped potential. This is a year, it seems, due to COVID being right around the time that these guys got into college, where more mature players got extended opportunities, and since you draft primarily for 4 or 5 years, always betting on young guys to continue to ascend is sort of overblown at times, I feel like. But that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to still give me a thumbs up quickly, subscribe if you haven't yet, and if you want to share this with a friend or two to help me out and grow this channel together, that would be awesome. What did you think of the list? Who are some of your favorite players in this draft? Feel free to let me know in the comment section. And as I mentioned during the intro, this is more so a quick overview and wanted to give you some names that I really enjoyed watching or think are undervalued. Over on my page Footballtalk.com is where you can find real in-depth scouting reports on the top 10 prospects and a few honorable mentions for every single position. Plus, if you want to stay up to date with all my work, or hear some of my random thoughts I have on those players, or just stuff around the NFL and college football, the links to my social media accounts are down below and on the screen right now. You can also hit me up or comment on my stuff there anytime, and I'll try to get back to you quickly. We're finishing up these positional draft rankings and my top 100 big board over the next 2 weeks. Then I'll have another video on here the Sunday or Monday before the actual draft for my final mock draft. Before on April 25th, it's basically my second version of Christmas when the fun really starts in Detroit. Hoping to have you along for the ride. So until then, see you later. Peace!